Dying to be Stuckmocky, Chapter 27. There's no place like home. Vira had never been fond of tight spaces, especially dark ones, and it felt like this ladder was leading her into her worst nightmare. All those dreams she'd had of crawling into ever-shrinking tunnels until she got irretrievably stuck were tightening around her chest as she climbed down. She had to keep reminding herself she was a lot slimmer than a Stuckmocky, so there was no way she wouldn't fit through. All the same, when she felt her foot touch ground and could hear that the space around her had opened out, she was absurdly relieved. She turned around to move out of the way of the next person coming down the ladder, but instead froze at the sight before her. Ow! My apologies, Vira. I cannot see anything in this darkness, and the creature under my robe is not making matters any easier. As Mirrin spoke, he stepped cautiously down next to Vira and turned away from the ladder. Oh! They were standing at the entrance to a small cave, and although the shaft they'd just climbed down was stiflingly dark, the cave was glowing with an eerie green light emanating from a carpet of mushrooms coating the rocky ceiling and most of the walls. Before Vira could get much more than an initial impression, she was pushed aside by a furry body descending the ladder. Fahyrjeon, as it turned out to be, studied the cave and its few rustic contents carefully for a moment, then nodded approvingly. All that's required is some bedding and will be most comfortable. By this time Vahira had joined them, and to make room the two humans were pushed forward into the middle of the cave. It was high enough to easily stand in, but was only slightly bigger than the average domestic bathroom in Vira's estimation, and it smelt damp, just like the average bathroom. Voices sounded strange too, and Wishoah's stream of quiet grunts sounded like it was coming from two different sources. As Fahyrjeon and Vahira moved into the cave as well, it became even smaller. Vira was having a lot of trouble picturing it as home, so she avoided saying anything in case it came out negative. So, what do you think? Asked Fahyrjeon. I've always wanted to live in a toilet, Vira heard herself say. Oh dear. What is a toilet? Three voices asked in unison. Oh, double dear. Never mind, Vira quickly responded. What was that you said about bedding, Fahyrjeon? With any luck, some comfortable pillows and mattresses would completely transform her opinion of this hole in the ground. Yes, bedding. And some food would be advisable too. Vahira, perhaps you could take Vira to the Charnstead and get some... The rest of the sentence was unintelligible, as Fahyrjeon had begun speaking in the grunty Stuckmocky language. Vahira took hold of Vira's hand and led her back to the ladder, where a horizontal opening at floor level was now visible to Vira's acclimatizing eyes. Beyond the opening, she could just make out a dark tunnel sloping gently down away from her. Vira's nightmares rushed back at her. Don't be concerned. The tunnel opens out just past this entrance, said Vahira, as it got down on hands and knees and crawled through the hole. If you're like me, this could be the beginning of a bad dream. I don't know why we've never gotten around to widening it. Vira was somewhat reassured by this, and followed Vahira without having to crawl more than a metre. When she stood up again, she noticed a faint glow at the other end of the tunnel not far away. It sounds like you've lived here a long time, said Vira, but Fahyrjeon told me Stuckmocky are nomadic. If nomadic means we move around and don't just have one home, then yes, we're nomadic, replied Vahira, its voice sounding odd in the rock tunnel as they walked. We move when food gets hard to find, or when our home has been discovered by the uplanders, or we just feel like a change of scenery. There are many places we live, but I think this one is my favourite. As Vahira said this, they came to the end of the tunnel, and Vira found herself at the edge of an enormous cavern. Her mind didn't know what to take notice of first. The dozens of Stuckmocky of all sizes moving about doing whatever their Stuckmocky business was. The millions of tiny, glowing and sparkling coloured lights scattered across the pale roof of the cavern, or the similarly colourful stream that flowed through the middle of the floor, full of darting, brightly glowing objects that Vira could only assume were fish. She certainly had no difficulty seeing everything, as all the lights combined to illuminate the cavern with a soft, shadowless glow. Who wouldn't want to live in a permanent Christmas? Breathed Vira in awe, then quickly added, I'll explain Christmas later. And toilet too, I hope, smiled Vahira. Oh yeah, that, muttered Vira guiltily. Vahira led the way to the left across the sandy cavern floor, towards a series of openings in the rock wall, while Vira felt uncomfortably conspicuous by her very humanity. She was surprised but relieved by how little interest her presence generated among all the Stuckmocky who passed by. A couple of times she was flashed a welcoming grin, but mostly she was ignored. As they passed the first opening in the wall, Vira saw that it was a small cave full of a strange assortment of stone and wood tools, in the middle of which gleamed the sword only recently in Mirrin's hand. When they entered the second cave, she found it full of dried grass and reeds. Fahyrjeon bent down and scooped up a huge armful of the hay, then stood waiting. Vira took the hint that she should do the same, so she wrapped her arms around as much as she could and stood up. A good half of her hay slipped back onto the floor, and Fahyrjeon gurgled quietly. Without further comment, it turned and led the way out of the cave and back across the cavern. The hay was soon tickling Vira's nose badly and making her exposed forearm itch, and she could see any number of bugs crawling around in it, so she didn't know whether to hope the hay was her bedding or her breakfast. Either was a grim prospect. "Vahira," began Vira after a while, "did Fahyrjeon ever tell you why it named you Vahira?" "Oh, my birth parent named me Vahira, not Fahyrjeon." "So you're adopted?" "If adopted means what I think it means, then of course I am. We all are. I chose Fahyrjeon to be my care parent, because we just seemed like the perfect match. There really wasn't anyone else in the clan I considered." Vira was delighted by the beauty of this concept of family. Then an intriguing thought occurred to her. Before she could ask Fahyrjeon about it, the Stuckmocky spoke again. "I am named after the warrior goddess Fahyrjeon, of course." "Warrior goddess? I thought I knew all the deities in the game. What's she like?" At the astonished look on Fahyrjeon's face, Vira added, "I'm not from these parts. Things are a little bit different where I come from." "That explains much. Fahyrjeon is wise, cunning, and courageous, and uses battle only for defence, not for glory or conquest. She is said to take human form when great need arises. I am not at all sure why I was named after her." By this time, Vira was required to get down on her knees to push her hay through the low tunnel outside the home cave. When she emerged on the other side, she could see Fahyrjeon and Mirrin sitting cross-legged on the floor of the cave, with their pilfered basket in front of them, newly full of various fruit. Wishoah was sitting comfortably in Mirrin's lap, sucking on a brightly coloured fruit, and dribbling copiously onto its legs. "Well, I guess that means this hay is the bedding," thought Vira, as she dropped the bundle on the cave floor next to Fahyrjeon's pile. "I wonder if Stuckmocky spit doubles as insect repellent." Mirrin looked up at Vira. "Wishoah seems reluctant to go home," he observed. Vira smiled at the sight of the sprog, happily slurping and gurgling in Mirrin's lap, an arm looped affectionately through one of his. "I hate to tell you this, Mirrin, but I think it already is home."